I walked into the office one June day a bunch of years ago. It was a gorgeous day outside and sunny and blue skies. Um, I had been a reporter for the Southampton Press on Eastern Long Island for about a year at that point. It was a nice job. I loved it. I was covering a lot of municipal meetings and events, press conferences, that type of thing. I was looking for something a little meatier to write about. So I walked into the office, and my editor Mike was there. He was a gruff guy. He was always talking from the bottom of his throat, and he was kind of growling. And he didn't like to be disappointed, and I didn't like to disappoint him. And he looked over at me and he said, "So I got a call from somebody that said there's some homeless people living in the woods in Hampton Bays up near the train tracks. Why don't you go find out what's going on?" And that was it. He told me about where he thought they were. So I drove over there and I start walking down the train tracks. And it was a real wooded area along the tracks. There was a lot of open space there, woods. And it was getting a little darker and darker the further I went as the trees were kind of covering, blotting out the sun. And I kept walking and I kept walking. I really didn't expect to find anything. We heard rumors like that all the time. But I ran into this one kid who had kind of a skateboard track set up off to one side. And I said, "Oh, that's probably what people are talking about." So I got his attention and I said, "Are there any, we heard that there were some homeless people living up here. Are there any homeless people?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll show you where they are. They're just over the other side of the tracks and down a little bit." So I follow him over there. And again, it's like every step I take further into the woods, it's darker and darker along the tracks. And we come upon this opening, and I notice these huge pipes on their sides in a cleared area. They were some kind of drainage pipes. They were about 6 to 8 feet wide, cement things. Sun was glistening off them. They were on their sides. They had never been used, and they were just kind of stacked around there from some forgotten project that the Long Island Railroad never finished. And I turned around to thank the kid, and he was already gone. And that should have been a first clue. So I start to walk toward the pipes, and I notice that there's some litter strewn around. There's some clothes, some things hanging on the pipes, and there's this really odd 4 to 5 foot tall statue of the Virgin Mary that was just very, very odd. And the closer I got and the darker it got, I realized that there had been people sleeping in these pipes. There was makeshift bedding inside the pipes, and some trash strewn around inside, and there was a radio that was actually playing, some transistor radio tuned to one of the pop stations. So I'm looking around and I'm walking there. I've got I used to wear a shirt and tie to work, so I'm wearing my shirt and tie. Got an old film camera hanging around my neck. I got my pad, and I'm just kind of taking some notes on what's going on. And out of nowhere, I hear, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I turn around, and there's one of the homeless guys. He's got long hair. He's unshaven. Clothes were a little unkempt. So I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm a reporter from the press. We heard about your camp here, and I was just hoping that we could tell your story." And he gave me kind of a funny look, and he's like, "I'm not sure." And I said, "Keep your name out of it. No, no problem. We'll protect you and make sure that nobody knows that it's you. And he said okay, kind of grudgingly, and I started asking him for a few questions. I found out that people had been staying in those pipes for a couple of years, mostly people who couldn't afford the high rents of the area, that type of thing. And we're having a little conversation. And then I hear from another side of the pipes, hey you, and a lot of expletives and get out of here, what are you doing here, you can't be here, get out of here. And I turn around and there's another guy looking similarly dressed, and he's holding a knife. And I'm like, oh crap. And again, I've got this, at then that time was an expensive camera around my neck. And I'm thinking, well, I could run. I don't know that I could outpace these guys, and if they caught me halfway down the tracks, they're going to mug me, or they're going to hurt me, or worse. And I'm also thinking at the same time, this is a really good story, and I want to get this story. So I turn to him, and I'm kind of trying to be in a calm tone of voice. I'm giving him the same line as the other guy. I'm saying, I just want to, I'm a reporter from the press. I just want to tell your story. And he's having none of it. He's inching closer to me. He's got this long, it was one of those fold-up knives, and he's got it open, and he's holding it, and he's swearing at me. You got to get out of here. You got to, you don't belong here. You got to just get out of here. And I really thought that I was scared. I thought my days were numbered. I didn't know what I was going to do. And again, I was a heavy guy. I was a smoker. I didn't know if I could outrun these guys along the railroad tracks. So at that point, I decided running wasn't an option, and I wanted the story. So I sat down on a little one of those milk crates that was turned over for a chair. I just sat down in the chair, and I was a smoker at the time, like I said. I reached in my pocket, I pulled out a cigarette, I lit it up, and I looked at him, I said, if you're going to kill me, just let me have a cigarette first. And he started laughing. He cracked up. My negotiations in trying to get him to talk about a story weren't working out, but a little humor seemed to do the trick. And he said, all right, he said, if you give me a cigarette, he said, you can ask me some questions. I had half a pack in my pocket, and I said, take them all. And I proceeded to do the interview. I talked to him. I had a lot in common with these guys. They were both heavy drinkers. One of them was working. He just couldn't afford the rent. They knew that they were drinking excessively. They knew they had a problem. I was sober for a few years at that point. I didn't tell them. I didn't share that with them. I didn't want to preach. I just wanted to find out what was going on with them. And we sat there smoking cigarettes and talking. I took some pictures of them kind of silhouetted near the Virgin Mary. And then I got out of there. I wished them well, told them that if they could somehow get a copy of the paper, they would probably be in it the following Thursday. And I've never walked down train tracks as fast as I did to get away from those guys. But I had the story. I got back to work, and I wrote it up. We were going to press the next day. So I told Mike about it, and he was like, well, let's see what you got, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I got the story, and it came out really well. The photos came out really well. I got a lot of accolades for it. I felt really good about my reporting skills. It was probably a cigarette that saved my life. And the story got a good reception. It splashed across the front page, and people were like, oh, homeless in the Hamptons, how can that be? Um, and I felt really good about myself in the story until I found out a few days later, after the story had come out, some town official had ordered the fire department to go in there and spray down all the pipes with hoses and force those guys out of there. I never found out what happened to them or where they went. But it was my story that made the homeless homeless.